All right, folks, it's time to get serious. If you have been intending to get your financial shit together and you still haven't made an appointment with Molly Morris, you need to do so now. Go to M3 Virtual Accounting and you can have a completely free consultation where you will talk about what it is you do and what you need, and Molly will determine whether or not she can help you. And I just really want to emphasize to everybody, I wish so much I had hired her sooner. Again, it's m3virtualaccounting.com.
This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Ted Lasso, Season 2, Episode 7, Headspace. In this episode, no, we are not talking about the app Headspace, which leads you to meditation and inner peace. We are talking about baths and candles and alone time, which leads you to potentially meditation and inner peace. I don't really like the way this episode ends. Welcome to Unspoiled. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Sharon. Didn't like the way this episode ended, huh?
Listen, as soon as he saw that and I saw him put his phone down, I was watching with Owen and I said, he's about to take it out on that poor kid. Mm-hmm. And then sure enough, and oh, fucking Nate, dude, you need therapy so bad, bruh. It's bad. This is like real bad. It's bad. It's so bad.
It's
like,
bad.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where I'm like, can we just like sort of remove him from society temporarily until he gets this shit sorted? Because I feel like him being in and amongst the people, it's not good for anybody he comes in contact with. But I know that's just not how it works. But it should be how it works.
Yeah.
Frankly.
If you had to just throw the wildest prediction out there, if I asked you right now, what do you think happens with Nate? Does this escalate? Does it get resolved? Does he just melt under a house after it lands on him like the Wicked Witch from Wizard of Oz? Like, what do you think happens?
That one. Yeah, I definitely think a house is going to land on him. And then his feet are going to weirdly curl up into a pair of really nice trainers. No, like, the thing... So I'm going to say not necessarily what I think is going to happen here, but if this were like a slightly more cliche show, what I think would happen.
Okay.
And I want to say this with the caveat that if this is indeed what happens, it's not going to make me go, oh, well, then the show is much more of a cliche than I thought. It tends to be that if the show does things, even if it's something that I might have seen coming, it does it in such a way that it still feels fresh. So it's fine. However, I could see Nate saying, like, somebody seeing him doing this and calling out the fact that he is acting like his father. And I don't know how that would even work, but it is, as somebody who often has manifested some of the worst traits of her own father, who is highly critical, not to the degree that Nate's father is. I will say this. I turned up in the newspaper and my dad went and bought 15 copies of that newspaper and had 4 of them laminated.
As he was supposed to.
He is not acting like this. But that said, I didn't realize until it was like really specifically pointed out, okay, it's not about religion and it's not about XYZ, but you realize you're still exhibiting the same exact like fundamentalist views and control issues, right? And I was like, oh, wow. Oh. I feel like it would have to be somebody who's like familiar though with how his father behaves and would also be around him in the workplace. And I don't see anybody who knows his parents and would be in the position to like make that comparison.
Right.
So I don't really think that's what's going to happen, but I would like it if he had a real like, and it's weird because he isn't even acting like his father exactly. His father isn't, as far as we have seen, he hasn't actively been vicious to him.
Mm-hmm.
He has been unimpressed and impossible to please.
Withholding.
Yeah, but there's nothing in him that we have seen that is like, you're
malevolent.
A painting that is used to cover up a blood stain on the wall, kind
Mm-hmm.
of like.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, his father is somebody that it feels like has these extremely rigid expectations, but he holds himself to those expectations as well. And he isn't trying to pull other people down to simply make himself feel better. That's not really the vibe I get from him. Whereas with Nate, it really feels like whenever he is like being vicious to other people, it's in an attempt to make himself feel elevated. And that said, maybe it is what's driving his father, you know,
Right.
but we haven't really seen enough.
Right.
So it's really, I want whatever it is that happens to Nate to be private, because I feel like there are some people who need a public shaming in order to come around and be like, wow, okay, I really fucked up. Everybody is saying the same thing about my attitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nate isn't somebody who would do well with a public shaming because he feels so much shame constantly anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That one like tweet that was talking shit about him immediately shuts him down.
Out of seemingly an endless scroll of accolades.
Mm-hmm,
One negative comment undid all the positive things he had been reading, which is what it's like when you have a really fragile sense of self.
Yeah.
When you're critical, when you're self-critical, everyone knows that feeling of where the criticism is so much louder than all of the affirmations that you get.
Mm.
And I agree. We see Nate actively lashing out like a little kid, you know, the minute he's hurt, bruised, whatever, he does an immediate thing to try to balance that negative feeling that he has, to counteract it. And the way he does that is by being abusive to whoever is around him that he has even a slight bit of power over.
Yeah.
I loved the time that we spend with his father in this episode. Is that whole scene is so heartbreaking. Nate's so clearly there, ready to soak up some love and pride from his father, you know. Is in desperate need of a fucking attaboy, and his father could not be bothered to provide it. And then not only does he withhold that praise, but he then calls Nate out on even seeking it.
Yep.
Which is just such a fucking double whammy.
What it's interesting to me, and this is something that I really struggle with personally, and I know that it's not cute, but I do have this problem. When somebody comes to me with a certain like expectation of a response, and it's clear that they're setting things up for me to ask a certain question or have a certain reaction, I am really resistant to giving them what they are indirectly asking for because I don't respond well to passive aggressiveness. If you want me to have a reaction, I am much more apt to do it if you're like, look at the back page, look at the back page, versus, oh, they let anybody in the newspaper, huh? That is so much more like, I'm definitely still here for this, but I'm not going to acknowledge that's why I'm here and admit to you or myself that's why I'm here.
Right.
And I tend to be really, it's not, I understand that it's not rational It's just I have that kind of like contrariness in my personality in certain places, and that is one of them. And so the way his father just sort of doesn't give him what he's clearly looking for, there was a part of me that sort of like weirdly understood him being like, oh, I get it. So that's why you're just weirdly here sitting across from me, like staring at me at the table. Okay.
Right,
now it
right.
makes sense.
Right.
But so like with the full
Imagine.
acknowledgement that that's not a good way to operate, it's just your kid though, dude.
Right.
It's
Like
your child. Get over it.
imagine trying to say to someone like Nate's father, hey, I'm on the back page and I'm really excited and I'd like you to look at it and be excited with me. Like,
not happening. Not with a man that you've lived with.
Right.
Like this.
It's weird. That type of whatever you want to call Nate's father, that type of coldness and real reluctance to heap praise, whether you can think it's deserved or not, onto your child, it probably kind of helps build the type of personality that can't just be like, hey, look, I'm on the back page. How great,
exactly.
You know? Like 35 years of that.
I have really like tried to understand that I have this reaction and understand that like the people who behave this way were probably brought up with a parent who's hugely withholding and critical. And so they can't be like direct the
right.
way that I want them to be.
Right.
So I try really hard to like keep that in mind, but the instinctive rejection of giving somebody what they're kind of asking for, but not really, it just makes me feel like I'm being manipulated.
That was the word I was going to use, was manipulation, because that's what it is. It's like you teach a child that they can't be direct about a thing. So they have to find ways to manipulate either the person they're dealing with or the situation to try to find like an end way to get to the result they want. But it is manipulation. And so when you talk about sort of a trigger, sort of reflexive reaction to that manipulation, it's because it's a real thing that's happening, even though the person is doing it is like doesn't necessarily have nefarious designs when you think about people being manipulated, right? But it still is manipulation. Yeah, this part of the Ted Lasso journey, really, and I mentioned it a little bit before, and I'll continue to be kind of cagey around it, but I just cannot stress the way the community as a collective begin to fracture as we get more into this story.
Interesting. Okay.
And the thing that was so funny to me about watching it happen was that the first season and the first 1 or 2 episodes of the second season, people did this thing, and I fell into it a little bit myself, where we start to feel really good about ourselves because we like this really good show, you know? And we start to like the fandom, the Ted Lasso fandom latched on to certain things. The believe sign, right, was everywhere within the fandom, and people were like making it mean things for them in their day-to-day life or whatever. The be a goldfish,
right,
was huge, and the fucking Walt Whitman thing, like that he says at the bar with the dart game with Rupert about if you were curious, like, you know, if you had asked more questions, right. What does it, be curious, not judgmental? So, and we were all just really feeling ourselves because we all believe, we're all like, be curious, not judgmental, you know, have empathy, try to figure out what's going on with other people. And then Nate started to be an asshole. And all of the empathy and be curious, not judgmental, just went right out the door.
That's how it works. That's how it works.
And like
it's all well and good to say in hypotheticals to be patient and kind and generous with your fellow man. And then you are behind a woman at a checkout who says, I don't need your charity. I'm not poor. You're poor.
Oh my God. Did you see that?
That sure did.
Wild. And then he was like, I'm just in a hurry.
I'm not being kind. I'm in a hurry. Oh my God. We stand a king.
We really do. We really, really. Guys, we're talking about a Father Nathan Monk post from earlier this week, maybe?
Yeah, it was only a few days ago, I think.
And you want to tell them?
Yeah, he was like, had just come out of, I think he describes it as like a Thanksgiving hangover from being around family and just like the emotional upheaval of just dealing with that. And so he goes to the store to get like basically a Kenny Rogers Roasters meal and like a giant gallon of Arizona iced tea, and is waiting to check out, very tired in his pajama bottoms and sunglasses like he's Johnny Cash. And there's a woman taking forever and then flipping out on the cashier saying her card won't go through. And he offers to put it on his card along with his lunch. And she screamed at him, "I don't need your charity. I'm not poor. You're poor." And started to scream for the manager. And he interrupted and said, "Ma'am, I'm not being kind. I'm in a hurry." At which point she completely shut her mouth,
deflated,
and urged the cashier to like hurry because she was suddenly actually embarrassed. Whereas if it were charity, then she had this like righteous anger about it. Just one of those moments with like the shutdown that he managed without really intending to was so complete. And her response to what was an act of generosity is so inconceivable to me. And this is what I mean. Like, there are people who react in ways that I don't get it. I truly don't understand. What? You're a person in the world and you're out here acting like this. And it's hard to keep in mind being kind and not judgmental when you're faced with a person behaving like this. And sometimes a person who is like every stereotype, you know, like this, if this is a upper middle class white woman of a certain age acting extremely entitled, you can just assign all sorts of things to that. And
we sure do.
So trying to be like, oh, we're not judgmental, but come on, we are. So yes, we very are. We create entire narratives in our head about who this person is after having interacted with them for 30 seconds. It's just, you know. I'm not trying to pretend I don't do it, because I am one of the worst ones. But it's just this is something that is comforting in its way, to think that we know what's going on with people and that we know who they are. And sometimes we're right. I'm not saying it's never true.
A lot of times we're right. That's what's so dangerous about it, is because, you know, we're always, oh, don't judge a book by a cover. You know, we continue to teach children that because it's a very like simple idea. But as you get older, you're supposed to understand that, you know, there are layers to that. But I judge people all day. And a lot of times I'm fucking right. Like, you know, and that's like the thing you're not like supposed to say, you know. But the fact is, we see some shit and we make a decision. Oh, that person's full of shit. That person's a piece of shit. Whatever it is, we come down to. And a lot of fucking times we were right to think it. We were absolutely right.
It's just like, look, if you're going to come at me with a certain tone in a Facebook comment section and you took your selfie in the driver's seat of your car with your Ray-Bans on, I am going to think a lot of things. And maybe none of those things are true.
But I bet a lot of them are.
I'm going to say probably yes. So... anyway, all right. Well, if we've got way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Let's go back to the beginning.
So we start things off with a montage of Keely and Roy's routine in the morning. And the thing that I have to say about this,
I Got You, Babe, is playing the whole time.
Right. The thing about this is, every time Roy looks at Keely, he is so clearly in love with her.
Smitten.
I mean,
Smitten
absolutely I mean, Owen and I were thinking from the way this started that we were getting a proposal this episode because he is just so obviously like marveling at, oh God, she's great. You know, every moment. And so it starts off in a sweet way and it's a little bit a lot, but it's okay. And then as it goes on, and as he's like, where are you going? You're not going to your office? Checking up on her. Can I come too? I'm like, oh no. Okay.
I love the very like subtle face acting that she's doing throughout this montage, right? It's just, oh no, sure. Hey, hi. And then like a little bit of a crack. And then a little bit more of a crack. And that final bit where she's going to get tea and he's like, can I come? Her face, like she can't hold it anymore. And
it's fascinating because like they decided to make Roy be the one who's a little clingy.
I love it.
Which is not something that you would expect. But I really believe it because Keeley is somebody who I think is a little bit more sensitive to reading other people and their emotions. And if Roy was wanting space, I think she'd pick up on it a lot sooner.
I mean, to be fair, if we're going to like lean into some gender stereotypes, generally it is the woman who is more attuned to these types of things because we have to be, you know, we tend to be more aware of the moods of the people around us, especially the men in our lives, because there's a certain amount of protection that comes from that, right? Like you might need to be really mindful of the mood of the people in your life because it could be dangerous in some cases, extreme cases. You know, and also just because we're just raised to always be concerned about how everyone around us is feeling. Are they 100%. Comfortable? What can we do to make them more comfortable? What do they need? What can I, you know what I mean? So which is part of why when men don't extend that same, like, it can feel truly alien. Like, how are you not always wondering and aware? Because we spend so much of our time in that place that it's like baffling that anybody can exist and not be burdened with the reassessment of every moment all day, every day. I'm sorry, but my puppy has just farted the most horrific fart. I thought for sure he had shit over there, but he is dead asleep, and that is toxic. My God. Oh. See?
Oh, he's been in here like days, and I have not experienced this, but woo.
Another reason to just keep it cats.
Look, the cats do this.
I mean, they do it too,
as well.
But I don't think they have just the sheer intestinal fortitude it would take to really like run you out of your office.
Like, and he is getting over an actual like gastrointestinal virus.
Oh, that
so
poor baby.
I probably could be much worse, actually. I'm probably pretty lucky that it hasn't been. But the utter angelic face he has on in his sleep right now after having done this fucking war crime. How dare you, sir?
How can he sleep? No, he's just so...
Oh, biological warfare. Anyway, I'm sorry. We were talking about always being aware of other people around us and then not needing to worry about that. So and, I
was just going to say, and that's what I like about the sort of undercurrent is that there's this as Keeley is talking to everyone except Roy about this, because she doesn't want to hurt his feelings. But also it feels like there's a part of her that is hoping, and this is not really ever really articulated in the episode, so I might just be reading into it. But I felt like there was a part of Keeley that was really hoping that Roy would just get it on his own.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have to have this uncomfortable conversation. And then she gets really frustrated because he never just magically gets it.
Yeah.
Because they rarely ever do.
This is something that I find really fascinating because, like, I have struggled with being kind of codependent in relationships and needing to take time for myself that I'm not normally willing to take on my own. So when I'm like, in the past few years, I've tried to be really aware of the fact that like I'm home all day. And for me, when Owen comes home, I'm like, oh, yay, company. But he's like drained and has been working and is tired. And sometimes he just needs his time by himself. And it's hard for me to keep that in mind because I'm just absorbed in my own perspective, of course, as we always are. And it's really difficult to keep that in mind when you're excited to see somebody and you do just enjoy being around them, even if you're not doing the same things. I'm a big fan of him just like coming and sitting next to me and reading comics on his iPad while I play on my Switch. And we'll both have our headphones on and not be talking at all. But I just like him to be there. So I am much more of the Roy in this situation where I'll just be like, oh yeah, well, we're both home. And we can do our separate things and I can just be around and it's fine. But the fact, like once he starts to just like interrupt Sex in the City, and I love the scene that they pick. I love the scene that they go with her and Aiden fighting and her just telling him to just shut the fuck up. But once he starts to be like, oh, this book, can't put it down. I'm just like, dude, sir,
what he's reading to is just like, I mean, no shade. I didn't read those books, but
no shade, full shade. Those
full
books
shade.
Are bad.
Okay, I thought so. I thought they were really bad. I know like a billion people loved them, and they were like wildly popular books and movies. So I thought maybe I was mistaken, but I was.
The movies are so bad.
I've never seen it. I was fairly certain that they were garbage.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel better.
It's like the kind of like, again, if people like them, fine. I like garbage. Like there's tons of garbage I like.
That's true.
But they're very garbage. Like this man just full cloth invented stuff that a lot of people are out there acting like, oh, it's true. Like Roy here is just doing the head explode thing as if he thinks what's going on here is actually real, like the Knights of Templar. And he keeps like bringing this up and I'm like, Roy, babe, a lot of this is fucking nonsense. You know that, right? Like he's treating it like it's a documentary. And I'm like, sir, falling into a trap. I've seen an awful lot of people and it's been 20 years, maybe not falling for it anymore is the way. But the fact that Keeley is like, what I think is interesting as well is that he has moved into her place basically. We never see his apartment. We still haven't seen it.
We haven't seen his place yet. We know that he's got a very posh place, but we have not really been there. I'm assuming we've seen him watching that reality show with his yoga moms. I always assume he's at one of their houses. It never feels like he's hosting.
Yeah. Because I think I asked in that scene whether it was his place or not, and we both kind of were like, I don't think so.
At one point he asked someone to get him more wine. It feels like if that was your place, you would just get up and get your own wine and offer other people's. But so we haven't seen his place. He's been hanging out at Keely's, which why not? Her place is adorable. And it's probably much more homey and comfortable than his place. His place is probably all like stainless steel furniture, glass tabletops. One washcloth, I feel like, one towel.
Right? Like, it feels like it would be a combo of, like, incredibly luxurious in the way that you hired a designer, but also aesthetic in the fact that you hired a designer who does bare bones and you just never changed a thing after they designed it 8 years ago. And it's all the exact same stuff. And, like, that sounds... right to me. He's got one set of sheets and a top sheet with like a thin wool blanket and an armchair. He doesn't even own a couch. He has an armchair in front of his giant television for only him.
That all sounds about right.
Yeah.
But he also
it's
has
just like
a beautifully well appointed, lovely room for Phoebe. That's super comfortable and's got all her favorite things there. And that's the only part of his whole house that's like worth anything is Phoebe's room.
I love that idea. Okay, yeah, this is canon now. Full on. Everything is gray and white and black, and then you go into Phoebe's room and it's just like murals on the walls and things hanging from the ceiling, and there's 2 levels with like a fucking loft bed, and
she's got fairy lights everywhere. And yeah.
I love it. So like he's literally in her space all the time. And obviously like to a point she's okay with that, but it's just a lot. So, and the fact is, she's talking to everybody else about this because, like, telling somebody, I need time away from you, always feels just like sheer rejection.
Absolutely.
Even when you're
can't
on, like,
say it.
Yeah, it's just, you know that that's not what you mean, but wording it in a way that doesn't sound like you're just loading it with excuses as to how it's not exactly what it sounds like.
I mean, someone offered to give me a present and let me get a hotel room for a weekend just to have some space. And I can't bring myself to tell my husband that I might want to, like, a weekend at a hotel by myself. Like, how do you tell somebody that? So I just haven't done it. Haven't taken it up on the offer.
What I'm going to do?
Haven't done it.
I'm going to say that I'm going with you, and you can pretend it's a weekend away with me, but I just won't go. And you can just tell him, oh, yeah, me and Natasha did blah, blah, blah. And it won't have been real. That's all a lie.
I'm just going to have to Photoshop.
That's healthy, right? We're just going to lie to your husband. That's better than actual
Better than telling the truth.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't want to hurt his feelings. I would never want to make him feel bad. So,
What if he wants time away from you, too?
Oh, he tells me that all the time.
Well, then what the hell? If you know that he wants that, then what's the problem?
Because he doesn't really want it. He went away like a month ago for book stuff. It's been maybe 3 weeks now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He went away for the weekend. He was on my phone every minute, the whole time he was gone. I had never gotten so many phone calls and text messages.
He's being a real Roy.
He's being a real Roy. But so yeah. Oh, you know what else too I love about this whole thing with them is that Roy keeps walking in while she's talking to other people, and she never lies. Even though everybody else is always like, no, we weren't talking about you. And she's like, oh yeah, we were talking about you. And he's just like, meh, I don't care.
Yeah. Which leads her later to saying, and you don't care. And he's like, well, so you've been telling everybody that I'm just like this clingy fucking, and it's suddenly a very different thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, girls, we're us, I was going to say just us ladies, but like many of us in general, we talk about our partners with our friends. Mm-hmm. It's not as much a thing with men a lot of the time because they are socialized to not be emotionally vulnerable with one another. However, there are men who do this as well. And neither gender who do this as well. But the idea of like her chatting with her friends about perhaps how he moves his hips so it feels like his dick is crooked. It has a much different energy than I'm venting about how my pitiful boyfriend is just following me around like a puppy.
Yeah.
It's just, there's one that feels like, okay, the venting about how I leave my socks on the floor instead of putting them in the hamper has at least a sort of macho edge to it, if that's just how men are.
Exactly.
But if you're making me feel fucking pathetic, that's just, and I thought that was like a nice touch to have him specifically mention that being hurtful,
Yeah. There's a lot in this episode about, I mean, it turns out, it ends up being about our egos and the way we see ourselves and how our egos can be damaged and bruised. How our feelings get hurt. When we feel like people are not treating us or seeing us the way we hope that they see us, whether it's the way Nate is feeling, how Nate treats both Colin and Will, how Roy's ego is bruised when he thinks that Keeley has been telling everybody that he's like a pitiful little puppy dog.
Yeah.
Even with Ted and Dr. Sharon a little bit, there are some really like Ted makes some wild accusations to Dr. Sharon that are like really out of line.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
But yeah, all right. So let's get like on track, I guess, to make it through this episode. because I'm jumping all over the place.
How many times are we going to say that? Let's finish talking about Keely and Roy. Just like get to the end of them as a couple, because he catches her talking about him, and fucking Rebecca and
fucking
Higgins decide to snap. And then when they leave, they just decide to keep going with it, which was the best moment of almost the entire series, of just them deciding if I can continue. I don't know why that got me so bad, but it was very just extremely unexpected and just so silly. And Roy, when he finds out exactly, because like Keely loses her shit on him because of his interrupting her watching Sex and the City.
Yeah, it's the last straw. She can't take it. He looks at her when she loses her shit. He's just like, whoa. Yep. It's such a good reaction.
And I love it because like Ted's whole thing was, sometimes bottling things up is good. That's how you get pickles. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, sir, that's how you get this. Mm-hmm. If you don't bottle things up, you manage to have an adult conversation where you articulate your needs and they are hopefully receptive to that. And you have a back and forth. If you bottle it up, it pops. And you are unreasonable and often unkind in a way you wouldn't normally be, because you are at your limit. And they had no idea that was happening. And so you are both more angry than average because you've been waiting too long, and also resentful of the fact that they still haven't gotten it, which like turns it into this lovely cocktail that makes you meaner than otherwise.
And they are sitting there like, what the fuck and where did this come from? Mm-hmm. Feeling whether it's fair or not, because we talked a little bit earlier about how Roy probably should have been paying closer attention. But, for whatever reasons, he just was not. So from his point of view, he feels like he's being completely blindsided. Like, what the fuck? Where is this coming from? And she's meanwhile jumping up and down on her sofa. As a real quick aside, I have to mention one more time, one of my favorite things that they decided to do with Keely is, no matter what's going on with her professionally, as we're watching her grow from just being like the star soccer player's hot girlfriend / sort of model to like businesswoman, and to like marketing person, these little touches, like the whole time she's working on her very important project, she has this lovely purple pin with a fuzzy, like, the fuzzy little top. Just little things like that. Her sparkly pillows, her fun little folders, and this sort of this sort of rejection of what a proper,
serious businesswoman who only cares about business.
Exactly, right? Like they were just like, we're not doing that with her. And I love that so much. So when she's sitting at her little table trying to get work done, and he's being all sexy and doing what she says exactly how she asked, which just turned out to be even the worst turn on. But she's got this pen in her hand, and I loved every bit about it.
Yep, same. Yeah, it's a weird thing too, how like, because there's this was such a thing because I love my like cute goofy shit with glitter and whatever. It's like my entire brand. And there's a whole thing in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Paula has all of the like pink office stuff. And spoilers, she becomes a lawyer and she winds up getting rid of all of that. And I was so bummed because I felt like, honestly, who is going to notice that you've got all this pink stuff at your little cubicle? Like nobody's going to care. But it was like part of her being serious now. Yep. And a part of me, like, I know that there is a incredibly still conservative streak in the way you're meant to conduct yourself as a lawyer. But the way that particular office was set up, I was like, this is not that.
That's not. I mean, look at Daryl.
Exactly. And I know that for me, there have been more than one time where, because I am goofy as a person in my humor and also my accessories, that I have been deeply underestimated by folks who don't know me. And then when I produce something like, you know, a strongly worded letter, I will get, wow, that's actually really well written, with genuine surprise. That is deeply insulting, actually. But they just thought because I was writing my draft in a pink sparkly notebook with a purple pen, all of a sudden, like, I couldn't have actually produced anything of value.
Yep.
And truly, just everybody, get the fuck over it.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2022, kiddos. Like,
for the last, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So,
we've got people dressed in cosplay making excellent points about anti-capitalism. It's fine. We can send our messages with a variety of methods and
different colored pens.
We can accessorize our points.
Agreed.
It's fine. So anyway, so they have this blow up. The next day, that night, he just like walks away from her, and then the next day he doesn't even want to talk to her, and she's very mad because she wants to describe the porridge that she had that burned her tongue
and almost choked her.
And Roy is in a bit of a mood, and he starts to take that out on the players that he is coaching, and specifically goes after Jamie, telling him to take a certain tact with a move that Jamie is very mature about rebutting.
Yeah, Roy is
says,
like, you gotta
respectfully.
Yeah, you gotta stay on your guy. You gotta stay right there.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamie comes back with, that's not actually what we need in this moment. My teammate needs space, it ends up being. He needs space to make the play, and he's my teammate. I should trust him. We have to just mention that Roy is walking around just yelling whistle.
I could not stop laughing. My lips have a sensitivity to cheap metals, and I break out in like lip hives or whatever the fuck he says.
My lips are sensitive to impure metals.
Impure metals, that's the one.
So he's just walking around. Whistle!
I am certain, sir, that you could afford a stainless steel whistle. You could afford a pure gold fucking whistle. Go get one. Stop this.
The team would have provided you a plastic whistle. They make those
plastic
as well.
There you go.
But yeah, and so Jamie really stands his ground too, as Roy is just trying to kind of argue that that's not what's needed. And the other teammates,
I loved it because when Jamie says this, Roy stops dead and goes, "What did you say?" And we know he's saying that because he's hearing a whole different thing.
Right.
But all the rest of the team goes, "Oh shit!" And literally takes a step away from Jamie because they're like, "Dude." And Jamie just decides to fucking really say what he said. And I was like, good for you, bro. Yep. Okay. And that results in Roy just going, fuck! And walking away.
Jamie's like, I didn't even say anything bad this time. Oh my God. I love too that Jamie ends up walking into the boot room too one of the times that Keely is talking about what's going on with Roy and needing more space. It ends up being like Rebecca, Keely, Ted, Higgins, Will pops in, and then Jamie pops in. When he pops into, Jamie is like muttering, I wonder if they could take my name off and sew it back on with bigger letters.
Put it back on, but bigger. Sir.
My favorite bit about that is that he's not expecting really anybody to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
he looks up and is like, oh.
So it's like, who are you talking to? Maybe you thought Will would be in there. So maybe you thought
I kind of thought he was talking to Will.
A private conversation between him and Will. And that, like, you should be embarrassed that more people heard that. But he's not. He's just surprised they're there. But he's absolutely not embarrassed at all. It's impossible to embarrass Jamie.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
So when Keely comes home later, there's a bag, and she thinks that Roy is leaving, that he got so angry at this that he is just bailing on her. And she comes to the bedroom, and he brings her into the bathroom. that he has decorated with all the rose petals he stole from her neighbor's garden's rose
Ripped
bush.
him right to shreds.
And he undresses her very sexily, and I was like, is she just going to wind up fucking him instead of taking her bath? Because I would not be mad at her for that. I mean, come on.
It feels like it was a real close call.
Mm-hmm. And he puts her in the tub and says, you won't see me for 3 hours.
And he
asks Siri to play
the Roy is sorry for not understanding Keely needs more space playlist. Which
Joyce is saying it's on Apple Music, the playlist.
I was about to say the same thing. It's a real playlist. It's out there. It's on Apple Music and it's on Spotify too.
Joyce says lots of Sade. Nice.
And I think that's the Sade song that's playing in this scene is also. I wasn't a big I'm a huge fan of Sex and the City, but it's from that episode. Like that song is playing in that episode.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of Sex and the City didn't age well, but there are occasionally real moments that are evergreen. And her and Aiden,
I'm pretty
is a
sure
very interesting relationship.
I've seen most of it over the years, but it was never like a watch it every week when it came on kind of thing. Mm-hmm. For me.
Yeah.
But I
didn't watch it while it was airing.
I had enough friends over the years that liked it enough that I feel like I've probably seen all of it. But just a lot of it's out of order for me. And most of it I've never only seen once. It's like not many episodes I've seen more than one time. Yeah. So I don't even remember what happens with that particular guy. I remember he showed up in one of the movies.
Mm-hmm.
That guy.
Yeah, he's one of those that's supposed to be like the healthy relationship that she could opt into. But I never liked him. I didn't think he was a particularly healthy relationship either. So.
I just remember I don't really remember how their relationship ended. I remember he was presented as a very kind of like real guy as opposed to like Mr. Big being sort of unattainable. You know, whatever. This was like a regular, real man. Like I build stuff. I feel like was his whole energy. I'm a handyman kind of thing.
Yep, pretty much.
That actor is fascinating to me because he always plays that type of dude. Mm-hmm. He plays like a really solid, blue collar, gonna be good for you kind of dude, kind of basic, but in for the long haul. Nothing wrong with him. He plays that in everything he's ever been in. And
yeah, it's true.
He's married to someone that you would not expect him to be married to. And they've been married for a long time. And I can't remember who it is. But he's married to someone.
So what you're saying is he is that guy in real life?
Yes. When you Google him and you see who his wife is, you're like, word? Really?
All right.
He's married to somebody.
I'm not doing that right now, but I am curious.
Like Bo Derek or something.
What?
Right? Like somebody who's like...
Bo Derek still alive?
I think so. I can't remember his name where I would Google him, but I can't remember the actor's name.
Now you got me going. I'm going to go Aiden Sex and the City. But yeah, the Sex and the City, it's like weirdly not sex positive.
No, not at all.
And very like homophobic in its way, and then like kink phobic. It is just weird how much it was about sex but not comfortable with sex in any way. And it just there is some stuff that I feel like still feels true today, and there's some stuff that I'm like, wow, we have really come a long way since this was what everybody felt about a thing.
I love how
you're right, Bo Derek.
Oh, was it Bo Derek? Right? Okay. Yeah, and they've been married for a minute, and she's like 15 years older than him or something. Like.
All right,
yeah.
Nice. So that's how things end with Roy and Keely. So shall we back up and talk about Ted?
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Ted and his foray into therapy with Dr. Sharon was really difficult to watch.
Yep.
There's a lot of hard stuff in this episode. He is... All I could say is if My copays weren't so expensive. The first couple times I went to therapy, I might have just walked out as well.
What I'm thinking is like, I make this kind of fool of myself in front of the therapist, and I don't know that I'm going to be going back to them again because I'm going to feel a bit of a goon. Listen, coming back in the door a third time.
I mean, after
insulting your entire profession.
Right. The first one is just him being Ted. He's like this whole song and dance about trying to get comfortable, which is, literally he is so internally uncomfortable.
Yep.
So he's bouncing around from this chair to the sofa, laying on my side, laying on my back, a couple of sight gags, and she's just watching him the whole time while he's putting on this show.
It's like you said, he is so internally uncomfortable, but also it seems like he really thinks if he finds the right position, then he'll suddenly like be okay with everything. Mm-hmm. And the position that he like initially thinks, all right, how about this? When he finally is like laying and he's got a pillow behind his knees and I was like, actually, that does look pretty comfortable, Ted.
Oh, keep your spine lined up.
Right. He is distancing himself physically from her. Mm-hmm. And what she proposes is for him to just sit in the chair near and them looking at each other.
It's entirely too intimate
he does
for him.
not. Yeah. And it's interesting because like, I think she's right ultimately, but I don't know. Maybe let him start distant from you and not looking at you. Maybe like that's the way to ease him into the thing. It is pretty intense to just be that close face to face. Give him a bit of space on that.
I think if he had picked a position that wasn't like part of this whole performance, she may have let him just sit on the couch, But because
it was so tied in with him sort of
and also
procrastinating, basically. Yeah.
And also it was like some of the ways he was laying on a couch on his side, like he's on top of a bunk bed. Then like on his back, like in the New Yorker, he says.
The first one he does, he's like, I'm Don Draper, which I haven't seen that show.
I haven't watched it.
But I was like, are you? Because that just looks like you're on a couch. It doesn't feel that distinctive, but okay, fine.
It's really funny because there is like a promo still from that show that's literally just what's his name? The guy everybody says is so hot. The hot doctor from
John Hamm?
Yes. And it's him on a sofa like that, sitting with just like, that's it. That's the whole scene. He's just on one of those sofas in a suit with his legs crossed.
I guess.
But so the first session, it's all of that. And then when they get like face to face and he plays with that little bobbin head toy thing.
That Homer Simpson was so delighted with also.
Oh my God.
Look at him just going back for more.
Cover me. When he has the episode where he wants to work from home and he gains all that weight and then he wants to go watch a movie. He tells a little chicken thing to cover his shift. He comes back 2 hours. That. Oh my God. It's king size Homer. And he gains all this weight so he can be on disability so he can work from home. And he gets so bored. He all he has to do is hit the yes no button. Like that's all his whole job.
Oh,
so
okay.
He tells it, and then he comes back, and like all the alarms are going off crazy, and he's like, "What happened?" And the little toy is just laying on its side. He's like, "I left you in charge." Anyway, so Ted just leaves. He's not even combative. He just says,
"Yeah."
I can't.
He's like, what should I do? What do we talk about? And she says, why don't you start by telling me what happened yesterday? And immediately, I don't want to do this. Gets up and leaves.
And just leaves.
Yeah. And it's quite abrupt and very decisive. And I expected her to say something to him, but she doesn't. She just hangs back and like lets him bail. And then he returns again and is saying, I don't quit. Mm-hmm. Of course I'm back. I don't just quit things. But it feels much more like he wants to impress on her that he isn't a quitter.
Yep.
Not really that he cares about doing this, right?
And we've heard him talk about not being a quitter before. And what a big part of that, of his identity, that is, when he was having difficulty with his wife in the first season, and he finally, like, she comes to visit, and she's leaving, and she tells him something like, I know you say you never want to quit, but you're not quitting, you're just letting me go. You're just letting me be happy, right? So we know that this is something that he says about himself, to himself and to anyone else who's listening. I am not a quitter. That's a big part of his identity. So he shows back up to see Dr. Sharon, but he comes in packing heat, as far as I'm concerned. He does not does not come to this session in good faith. He comes armed to tell her about herself and what he thinks of what she does and her profession. And this is a side of Ted that we don't really see often.
Yeah. One of the things that he sort of zeroes in on is the fact that they charge for a full hour, but the sessions are only 50 minutes long.
Like it's a real gotcha moment.
He gets a real sort of smirk on his face with that. And it's interesting because, like, this is actually a pretty good step to me for Ted. Like, yeah, he's coming in hot and he is aggressive and he is unreasonable, but it's more honest than anything that we have seen so far in terms of him just saying how he really feels about the whole thing. So a part of me was a little relieved that he decided to unload like this, because the baggage that you have around therapy is a good place to start in therapy. And granted, he does not do this maturely or well. But nevertheless, I was sort of like, this is still a step in the right direction, weirdly. Even though it looks like a step backwards, I don't really feel like it is.
It's a level of honesty that we don't really get from him. I mean, well, I don't know if I love saying it that way, because I think that Ted is really honest in a lot of the interaction we've seen him have with the players and the other coaches. I think all that stuff is legit and, like, sincerely who he is. But Ted has this very Ned Flanders bit happening where it's like the fucking two Simpsons references in one episode. Yeah, y'all gonna get it. Because that was something else that happened a lot too. And I didn't really like when I first saw it. It was a lot of people talking about how Ted Lasso was like Ned Flanders. He was like a real life Ned Flanders. And I think that doesn't carry all the way through, but there are some things that on the surface. And one of them is the joke about Ned Flanders ended up becoming that he actually was really fucked up.
Yep.
And that he had developed a really unhealthy coping mechanism, and which was just to suppress or repress any sort of negative feelings, emotions, just push them down and be overly, like, positive, right?
Yep.
And so the whole weird way that Flanders speaks with the diddlies and all that ended up becoming like a way for him to literally choke down the bad feelings and say these nonsense words, right? And that feels really, like, similar to me with Ted.
Yeah.
You know?
100%.
And so
Ted, it's like you said, I don't feel like when he's being positive, he's being dishonest, because I think he really does think those positive things and believe the best of people and want to, like, the best for everybody, but it's not complete. He wants to simply not acknowledge the messy stuff.
Right.
And it, you know, sometimes that works. Sometimes choosing not to acknowledge it, it's a way to not focus on it, and that can be good. As somebody who can really dwell on the negative myself and bathe in it in such a way that is, like, self-indulgent, I could probably work on that. But there is the other side of it, which is if you don't acknowledge how you really feel about a thing, you're not going to make any progress forward, because you're not assessing the actual issue, because you won't look at it.
And the goal isn't for us to be perpetually happy or positive, the hope for us is to be like fully integrated people. You know, that we are aware of both the positive and the negative that we have inside, and that we can deal with both, you know.
Yeah.
You're not like, it's not real and it's not sustainable to just be like, I know Pollyanna gets used kind of erroneously. It doesn't necessarily mean, you know, what it turned into being, which is kind of like, I only see the good things in life, and you know what I mean? But I'm going to use it because I can't think of another example.
Okay, fair.
You don't want to just have someone walking around who doesn't acknowledge any of like the difficulties and the hard feelings and the struggles, and only ever sees the good and the positive and everything else like it doesn't exist, because then you don't give other people room to deal with that shit either, you know?
Yep.
Like,
yeah, it makes it so it's unsafe for anybody to share with you a like hardship they're going through, because it feels like you're just going to be like, well, but look on the bright side.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes there isn't a bright side, and it's okay to admit that, because sometimes things do just fucking suck.
Yeah.
And I always have a hard time with it because, again, I have a tendency to dwell too much. So
listen, who are you
there is a
to?
balance.
I mean, I'm thinking about like when we talk about the struggles that Snates have, and we had a conversation last week about where Ted is in relation to what's going on with Nate, and how Ted doesn't seem to be like, doesn't have his eye on the ball right now when it comes to Nate, which we see that wonderful moment where Ted is asking Beard after Nate does the apology, and Ted is like, did I miss something? Do I need to be like, and Beard is like, no, it's fine. But if you are having the kind of cancerous feelings that Nate clearly is dealing with inside, right?
Yeah.
How do you take that to someone like Ted? You know, what is who you think Ted is going to know about what it is you're dealing with? Like, you would never, like, that guy is not going to, he would have no idea, because he doesn't know any of this other stuff about Ted. You know, Ted doesn't show any of that stuff.
And that's what's sort of interesting, is that, you know, I'm gonna save that. There's something I want to say about that, but I want to wait until we're talking about Nate properly.
Okay.
So yeah, this second meeting, he gets very accusatory about the fact that you're charging for an hour, you're only doing 50 minutes. You don't know me, and you only are pretending to care about me because you are being paid to. And I don't know you, and I am expected to sit here and pour my guts out about my history and my mistakes and my regrets. And I don't fucking trust you. I don't have a reason to do that with you. And you're probably just going to wind up blaming everything on my parents anyway. So I could just take a shortcut and tell myself it's my parents' fault and not have to pay you. And the whole thing is very dismissive and minimizing of what she does. And I really appreciate it. He fucking bails again.
With a lot of spice.
Yep.
Slams that door.
She sees him again, she is honest about how he offended her and is like, would you coach for free? And he says, yes. And she says, but you don't. But you still care about your players. So insinuating that I don't care because I'm being paid is actually kind of offensive. Like, why do you think you can care and get paid for it and I can't, and I'm not capable of that also? And I really appreciated that defense of it, because I feel like maybe certain therapists might just ignore what he said or decide to like move on with a fresh slate and see that as he got it off his chest and we're just not going to address it. But I liked that she decided to like defend herself and be really like, hey man, that's actually kind of a double standard. What the fuck, you know? And
I'm going to call you out on your shit, because that's the kind of, because that's what I do. That's what this is going to be about. I love that she set that boundary. As someone who is learning, you know, very slowly about boundaries, I might not be great at them myself, but I'm learning to have a really healthy respect when other people maintain good boundaries. And I just, yeah, you're right. A lot of times we would have seen this play very differently on our TV shows and our movies. Where we've been kind of spoon fed a type of therapist that is, they exist, but I prefer this version.
Yeah, same. I'm just somebody who likes to talk things out completely, sometimes to my detriment and others' detriment as well. But I don't like to just be like, well, we'll just pretend that never happened. I'm not a fan of handling anything like that. And I will sometimes because I know there's no point, depending on who you're dealing with. Like
Right.
Owen's grandma and I are just going to pretend that text exchange about the puppies and her sharing that thing never happened. And we're just going to act like that was nothing.
Have to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got to pick your battles too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is like a relationship that if he is going to trust her, I don't think pretending things never happened is the way to go.
Agreed. I think that was a real moment of, if she doesn't call him out on his shit, he's not going to respect her and not going to trust this process and trust her to lead him through this process. I think that was really, really important. And I'm glad the show opted to go that route. Especially, it's a little, I thought, surprising too, because again, the show has set up this sort of premise of everybody's great, and everybody's super nice, and we all get along, and there's not like real, there's not real conflict, there's not real drama,
Yeah.
But the show keeps having these moments being like, oh yeah, I know that you didn't think we were doing that, but yeah, we are kind of gonna just go ahead and do that real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah. And there's also a sense for me of like the show acknowledging what many people feel about therapy. That these are probably some of the most commonly cited what's the word I want? Reservations that people have about getting into therapy in the first place. And they were like, you know what? Let's actually address them directly and have him say them and have her respond and see whether maybe that makes it easier for anybody to embrace this, perhaps.
When Dr. Sharon was first introduced, Ted and Rebecca have that conversation in her office where they talk about therapy. And they both are just like, no, that's what friends are for. Why would you go talk to a stranger when you have friends, and and all that. And yeah, I mean, I 100% used to say the same shit. Not about the 50 minutes thing, because I hadn't been therapy. I didn't know it was a thing. But I absolutely used to say out loud to people, going to therapy, that's fucking bullshit. Just, you have friends. You go to therapy when you don't have fucking friends. That shit's lame. Yeah, I was one of those people. Out loud.
I don't remember my feelings on it because, like, growing up, I feel like my mom was in therapy from when I was very young. So, and I knew she was a mess, and I was just like, yeah, therapy sounds like what the doctor ordered. And so, like, ever since being a kid, I was just like, nah, yeah. But I think I always sort of felt like it was for, if you were going to therapy, it meant that you had really gone through some serious trauma. And I didn't think of it as something just like anybody, whether it's like heavy trauma that feels really dramatic or not, can benefit from it.
I said that shit. Even I had been in therapy and didn't realize I was in therapy and said that shit.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Therapist is just sitting there with their tongue in their cheek like, right. Okay.
I was of the mind. I had that, even though I had been like assigned a counselor and all that kind of shit. I was in my early 20s. Therapy's white people shit. That's a white person's privilege. I don't have that kind of, I'm not like some rich white girl that can just be spending an hour complaining to a stranger about my life. Fast forward 3 times a month, if I'm lucky.
And there's also, for me, there's been the aspect of like, well, if you're self-aware enough, then you can like draw conclusions on your own and you don't need it because you can figure it out.
I'm so smart. Like, I can be my own therapist.
There is a part of therapy that is drawing your own conclusions. But the thing is, if you don't have a therapist to help lead you by the hand, sometimes it will take you 20 more years to get there. And they could have just done it in 2 months.
Also,
because they're like, girl, look.
We are not the best guides through our own neighborhoods.
Oh, sure.
We getting lost up in there. You know what I'm saying? So
More than one time, my therapist just being like, "Hey, why do you feel like you need to be working if you are awake? What's that about?" And I'm just like, I don't understand the question. What? Why would I not feel that way? Do other people not feel that way? That's weird. They're wrong. Okay.
But I'm awake and there's work to do. I don't understand the question.
There are things to do. So I just feel like that's pretty much answers your question, is that there are things to be done. Next question. Thank you. Anyway, okay, so it ends with that, like, leading to an actual session.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see it,
but we get an idea that they're, like, serious this time. Like, they're really gonna... Yeah. I love that he goes and makes a point to stop the little toy.
Yeah.
Just sort of, like, quieting the distractions that are around. And, like, yeah, I'm going to be focused on what we're about to do here.
And he, oh man, there's a point at which he says something about how, because she asked, like, his history with therapy, and he's like, I went to couples therapy with my wife, and she's like, so how did that go? And he's like, well, I'm here and she's there, and she'd be pretty mad if I was still calling her my wife, which I am. So I feel like that's really, and it's just like, again, all of this anger, you know. But after this one that seems more successful, we see him at the pub, and Trent Crimm, the Independent, comes up wanting a quote from him about him leaving the game the other night. And there's a sense for me that Trent knows it wasn't food poisoning, but Ted continues on with that narrative, very carefully saying that it was not this pub that they are currently standing at. The food poisoning.
It's like,
and then says, but I am fit as a fiddle now. Yeah. And that is what Trent goes with, but it feels like as he's walking away, there's a sense of not really buying it. You know,
you think that he has suspicions?
I'm not sure he has suspicions of what's actually going on, but I don't know. It's so hard to say, because part of me is like, does Trent just want to know what's up with Ted? Like, is it he's saying, like, on the record, can I have a quote? But I feel like he's probably a guy who has a hard time getting close to people, and maybe he's just like, hey, bud, you all right? And he doesn't know how to just ask that.
Checking up on his friend.
Yeah, a little bit, you know? Like, just, hey, man, you okay?
But I'm going to try to keep it all official. Very official business. I need
exactly.
a quote. Yeah. I like the idea that Trent was, A, really sincerely delighted to just bump into Ted at the pub. Mm-hmm. And then, B, just kind of be like, hey, buddy, you all right?
Yeah.
You know, but not knowing how to do that, because they don't really have that kind of relationship. I mean, they could. Ted would be 100%.
They could, sure.
Ted would be so on board with that. But
I really wonder how Trent Crimm would handle it, because, like, I feel like he's like me, where it's like, you sometimes you're just like, well, I just want to tell people this because they should know. Mm-hmm. Like, it'll be helpful if people know about it. And he doesn't get, like, dude, no, this is not, no, don't do that, you know? Like, he feels like a blabbermouth, but just in a different type of way than I am a blabbermouth. But still kind of like, that's what a reporter is a little bit, is being a blabbermouth.
That's
you know?
It's kind of the job.
Yeah.
I think, too, that Trent has a real, genuine, like of Ted, like, thinks that he's just like a good, decent man, and wants to see him be okay. Doesn't believe he'll necessarily be successful as a football coach, but wants Ted to be okay. Yeah. And is just looking for a sign that says that, yeah, Ted's going to be okay. I'm okay over here. And Trent has this sort of, I mean, he's such a professional, especially with the running joke of how he always announces where he works, right? Trent, the Independent.
Right.
because he has this veneer of like very stern professionalism, and there's like this distance between you, the coach, and me, the outsider that reports on what you do. And it's almost like he's a little like he doesn't know how to navigate these feelings of warmth he has for Ted.
Yeah. And the way that Ted reacts when he asks about it feels to me like Ted's a little scared at the fact that anybody is even still asking about this. Like he thought, oh, we all settled. It was food poisoning. And I thought that was done. Yeah. And the fact that anybody is still talking about it means that I'm going to have to keep answering this maybe. And I don't love that because I am lying. Right. And I don't want this to be a fucking thing I have to keep talking to strangers about.
Exactly. Talking to strangers. Like I just got done talking to a stranger. We didn't see it, but I just got done talking to a stranger about this fucking thing that happened to me in that session. Yeah. And now I'm trying to have a quiet moment at the bar and here's someone else wanting to talk about this fucking thing that happened to me that I don't want to talk about.
So, all right. Backing up, talking about Nate. We already talked about him going to his dad for approval and validation and not getting it. He is, every scene we see, it starts with about 30 seconds of him scrolling through Twitter or the Google results for his name or whatever, trying to get the approval he didn't get from his dad from everybody else. And just, you know, it's so difficult because like, this is something that whenever you want to succeed in a field and you have a major thing happen, it's impossible to not try to find out how the world is reacting to you suddenly being more prominent, you know? And it doesn't even have to be on a big scale, but like with the podcast, it's been over a year since I've looked up a new review of any of my shows because I have just come to the conclusion that I do my shows the way I do my shows. And if you don't like them, that sucks. Oh, well, but I'm not really going to ever change the way I operate. I might change my viewpoints on things and I might, you know, advance further in my understanding and perspective, but overall, mostly, I'm going to probably keep chugging along the way I've been.
Right. At this point in the game. This
yeah.
is it.
But at first, I was reading all the reviews.
I remember.
I was scouring the interwebs, trying to find feedback and
asking for reviews.
Asking for them, you know. And like, to be fair, the asking for reviews was a lot. Just that bumps us up in the search results. The more
I remember.
But also, you know, and I made a negative review that I got my banner image for the show on Facebook because I found it amusing. But it is an understandable thing to want to go and see what people think. And it's a real double-edged sword because I think in some ways the feedback that you get can sometimes be helpful, even if it's negative. And somebody can point out something and it like hurts, but you're like, I guess I do see their point, you know? At the same time, then you can fall into the trap that he does where you have 19 people saying a very sweet, wholesome thing about you. And then the 20th person says something critical. And that's the thing that overshadows all the rest.
That's all that you hear. It's all that you remember. It's all that you absorb.
And it's like, just finding a place where that's not what's happening anymore is difficult. And I feel like I have mostly found that place, and I'm not sure it's super healthy, but usually it's like, oh, the person who wrote this is clearly like a complete douchebag, so I don't need to take their opinion seriously because they're obviously a piece of shit. That's fine. Good. I'm glad you don't like me because if you did like me, I would actually have a problem.
The tweet that Nate gets this bad, and it doesn't matter, but the name or the handle of the person is something really dumb, like Jay the Man or something, right? And I remember when there's a close up of the tweet and I saw the username, I'm just like, oh, fuck that guy. That's somebody you immediately go, look at that name. Fuck that guy. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't say fuck that guy.
Nope.
Instead, we get some
He says,
really
fuck that guy, and he points to the locker room.
fucking, and then people are just catching strays.
Mhm.
Will, fucking Colin. Oh, God.
That whole thing with Colin. It's very interesting to me, the way Nate reacts to Colin. Because Colin, as a mature adult, goes to Nate after there's a back and forth with everybody on the field, joking around with Nate.
Mhm.
And he reacts just fine to Jamie and, is it Danny, the
And
other one?
Danny. Mm-hmm.
But when Colin says something, he's like, oh, you think you're a fucking stand-up? Like, really?
Right.
And zeroes in on him to, like, dress him down a little bit. So
Mhm.
Nate, later on, Colin comes to him and is like, Nate, do we have a problem? Like, did I do something? Because you were fine with them, but you got really mad at me specifically, and what's that about? And Nate basically is like, they are superstars and you're just filler,
Yep.
and you don't get to act like a superstar because
Yep.
that's not your place, and you should know your place.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting, Colin has a real struggle himself with self-worth.
Yep. Yep.
And I just think Nate senses it
Mm-hmm.
and sees himself in Colin and is kind of projecting his own shit onto Colin and lashing out at somebody who is the thing that he hates about himself.
And coupled with, Colin was one of the bullies at the very beginning.
Right.
It was Jamie was the ringleader, and then it was Isaac and Colin. And what we've learned about these men as we've watched the series is that we discovered that Colin, like you just said, is also very insecure, doesn't have a strong sense of self, and most likely did that thing where you glom on to more like powerful people in your group,
Right.
so that you don't become a target, right? So
Mhm.
he joined in the bullying of Nate. Nate cannot go against Jamie. You know, he's not gonna hold Jamie accountable for that shit. He can't like treat Jamie that way. He's definitely not fucking with Isaac like that.
Yeah.
But Colin,
Jamie, I think he would have a little bit more if it wasn't so clear that Ted and Beard are like not going to tolerate it.
Exactly. He tried a little bit. Like he never
Mhm.
really like tried aggressively with Jamie man to man, but he definitely was enjoying Jamie's hardships in a
Mhm.
way that caused both Beard and Ted to be like, "Oh no, we don't do that here." So he got shut down on that. But here's Colin walking around with a low key a target on his back,
Mhm.
and Nate zeroes right in on that.
Yeah, so he says these awful things, like truly.
It's weird.
It's amazing that it is
personal.
off the cuff, because I feel like I could sit down and write out an insult paragraph, and I don't feel like I would come up with anything nearly as absolutely fucking devastating as what he says here. It's so
bad.
Oh my God.
It's bad. And it is that thing, right, where we saw from Nate in season 1 that we all were like, oh, look at him go. When he reads the little, the little team meeting or whatever, calls everybody out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We saw then that Nate thinks about these things, thinks about the weaknesses in people, thinks about ways they're not as good as they should be or could be, and so, it's like off the cuff, but you feel like it's not really though,
And it feels like, again, he is saying to Colin the things that he feels people would say about him being a coach. Everybody around him are particularly outstanding people. And they bring Roy in, and he causes this immediate turnaround, so it seems. And Nate is just there. And he's not an artist. Yep. He is just there. And it's just, it's so hard to watch a person that is really in pain and keep it in mind when they are inflicting that
Yeah.
on another
Yeah.
person like this. It's just awful to watch.
I think the thing about what Nate sees in Colin, that he sees in, it's not what Nate thinks he sees in Colin is what he fears the most about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not just
Yep.
that Nate is worried that he is like Colin and isn't an artist. It's that he's afraid people think that about him.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's really
And then he finds the one tweet that
Mhm.
seems to support that.
Mm-hmm.
So Beard hears this all and goes and talks to Nate and is just like, that was fucked up
Yeah.
and you need to be better. What was
Yeah.
that even?
Yeah. Says it was weird and weirdly personal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is like a little like Beard was almost figuring out that what was happening there wasn't just
even about Colin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this frustrates me a lot because Beard hears this and is like, what the fuck was that? And we have seen him and Ted exchange glances multiple times this season over Nate's reaction to things. And I just want to be like, what is it going to take, guys,
Right.
before you really sit down and talk to him? Because he has bitten Will's head off enough times for ridiculous enough things that you should have stepped in already, and you haven't. And why not? Like, genuinely, I want to know what the reason is for holding back and letting him treat a member of the team this way. Is it just that you feel like, you know, I've been saying that maybe Ted feels like he has to figure it out, or that he's just like in a bad mood this one day and he's like letting it go. But it feels like they don't even see him as important enough to reprimand, is kind of like the vibe I have with it at this point, as he doesn't matter enough to the structure of everything to take an active interest in.
I think that Nate asked, did you tell Ted? And Beard says, no, this is just between us. And Nate, in the moment, seems really relieved and grateful that he hasn't told Ted. I suspect, and I agree with you, that there is a part of Nate that is doing that thing where you act out because you want your, I don't know,
your actual main mentor and idol to like take notice. Yeah.
And even though he's pretending that he's relieved that Ted isn't informed of this bad behavior, I think that there's a part of him that desperately wants Ted to be aware that, you know, he's struggling and acting out, so that Ted will intervene and pay attention to him.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't like the fact that Beard decides later on. It's one thing to be like, I'm not going to tell Ted about this in the moment, but when Ted asks about it, he isn't like forthcoming with any details about any of it.
No.
And I just don't like that. I feel like this is that was brutal enough that I really feel it warrants a full sit down and involvement with the boss. And it's bizarre to me how many times they have seemed taken aback by his attitude and have just not really pieced it together, the pattern that's happening right in front of them. It seems like they're treating every time as an isolated incident.
Yeah.
And how many times do there have to be isolated incidents before they're not isolated anymore? Like, what is that? So yeah, Nate apologizes to Colin in front of everybody and makes a point about it. And I was really thinking he would apologize privately. So doing it in front of everybody, I appreciated. And then they like give him the shirt that says Wonder Kid on it.
Yeah.
And it's so bizarre because the Wonder Kid thing is working out for him. The headline on the paper that he was so proudly showing off his father says Wonder Kid. All of the tweets say Wonder Kid.
But he cannot let it go.
And he can't admit he didn't say it. And I'm like, Just embrace the mistake, dude. It's on tape. It's on fucking camera.
Like this insistence that what I really said, I said it right. They just misheard me somehow. That there's a fucking, when he says it in the locker room and Jan Moss makes that, did you
He just goes,
face? It's like everybody even using the Chris Hemsworth Thor, like, is it though gif?
yeah.
But the Jan Moss one, I had stopped using it when we started doing this, so I didn't want to spoil you. But there's a gif of him making that face, and I just think it's just such a perfect, really? Are you sure?
Yeah, he doesn't choose to like argue, but he's like, come on, man. And I just find it's so fascinating to me that, oh my God, this puppy. Holy shit, kid. What on earth? You could tell me there was a pile of shit sitting on the floor next to me, and I would believe it. My God. I'm sorry, everybody. It's just really distracting. He is still asleep.
God.
This fucking terrorist.
It's the calling him a terrorist for me. I can't. He's just fucking silently bombing you to fucking smithereens over there.
Truly.
You're fucking the Middle East and that dog is the United States, just bombing you while we sleep.
Occupying my territory. Anyway, what I was saying was if Nate were smart about this, embracing the mistake would make him even more of a darling.
And this is what
and
they're trying to
admitting
do
the
for
fuck
him.
up. You know, everybody is good-naturedly ribbing, and they made this shirt in an affectionate gesture.
Yep.
And he is so defensive about a thing that is what they're using to connect with him, and he's just killing it.
Yep.
You know, it's this bridge, and he's just burning it because he feels like, but this bridge isn't according to the blueprints I gave you.
Exactly. This bridge is flawed, so the whole thing has to go. You know, he is so stuck and stuck in this like self-loathing that is palpable. You know, it's weird to have a 35-minute sitcom basically have a character that you feel so, at least I think, like how much he hates himself. Is just jumps off the screen. Like Nick Muhammad, the actor, especially when you think about what he was like in the first season and how we all kind of like rooted for his come up and like underdog, and then he becomes a coach and we're all just like, oh, hooray. Yeah. And then you get to meet him a little bit more and you see the darkness that's just underneath, just like a scrape. You didn't have to dig very hard at all. It was right there. And it just jumps off the screen. It's really hard to watch. It's maybe like a little too close to home for me in some ways.
And there's a part of me too that feels like so bad for the people that he's attacking, because since he keeps it so under wraps, it feels like they could be very easily gaslit and nobody would believe that this interaction happened the way that it does. I'm really glad that Beard was sitting there listening to the whole thing. But again, he takes no action. So what good is that?
When Will brings the pins in, right before Colin comes in for his talking down, Will comes in and he's just like, got pins. Hey, your pins came. And he's like being like funny and like sort of like over the top. It's just pins, but whatever. And Nate has his back to the door and just doesn't turn around, doesn't acknowledge him. Like, it's so fucked, you know, and so unnecessary.
It's a repetition of how his father reacted to him sitting down at the table. His father didn't even look up. No acknowledgement he's even there.
Yep. This is what Nate thinks it is to be like a man, I guess, you know.
And it's weird in the moment with everybody with the shirt, even though he's defensive that he said it right, he's still touched and pleased, apparently. And then when he sees the tweet that says, I don't know, I still think he seems like he's probably a loser, he gets up and he walks into that room, and you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You hear him say, if you ever humiliate me like that again. I don't even remember what the threat is that he makes.
I'll end you, or,
something like that. Yeah.
Basically you'll be done here. When he gets the jersey, the team, one of the players singles Will out as being the mastermind.
The one whose idea it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why he comes at him like, you humiliated. And I'm like, everybody was really cute and sweet about it. And you're acting like you were the butt of some joke when that was not the energy in that room at all.
Yep.
But he needs somebody to lash out at after seeing this comment.
Mm-hmm.
And the only person below him on the totem pole in a significant enough way that he can get away with talking like this is Will.
Yep.
And I just felt so bad for Will, because like when you are in this position working for somebody who treats you like this, you are not at that age, because he's clearly really young.
Yeah.
Able to put it together that this isn't about you. And you just sit there going, what did I do? Like,
I mean,
you start tiptoeing around a person.
It's
you know?
gotta fucking feel like it's about him. Like, he has no idea what else is going on in fucking Nate's life, right? All he knows is that every time he comes to work, this fucking guy has got something to say about how he makes the fucking sport drink, that he put lavender in the fucking laundry. Everything he does is wrong. And this guy is being an asshole to you. But he's like that singing frog from fucking Warner Brothers cartoons, that no one knows it can sing. Because... Sorry.
What a weird comparison to me.
The singing frog for me is like a standard bearer. That is the the thing that like no one else ever sees it happen, right? Hello, my baby. Hello, my darling.
I mean, it works. It's just very surprising.
But to your point about Will, like being gaslit, like even if he tried to be like, hey, I went to give Nate these pens and he was a real dick to me. Like, that's not going to sound like anything.
Yeah.
Unless you happen to see it.
The fact that Will is treated this way and still thought to do something nice for Nate after the way he behaves towards him really says a lot about Will as a person. Like, it seems like Will can sense Nate is insecure and unhappy and wanted to do something to make him happier. Like, it was just a very compassionate thing to do. Yeah. That really, looking at it from the outside, it's more than Nate deserves from Will,
I wonder how much of it was Will trying to figure out, like, if I can just get on this guy's good side, maybe he won't be such a fucking dick to me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
work. It looks like it worked. Doesn't work.
Everybody's all happy. Nate gets a great smile on his face, and the whole team thinks he's fine. And then he does this really shitty thing when no one else is watching.
It's just so ugly. The way he delivers that line, too, is really well done, because the viciousness of it, it's just a lot. It's just a lot. And getting that across when we can't even see his face. All I did was hear the dialogue, and I felt like I had been slapped. And I was just like, wow, that's fucking acting right there, sir.
As before we like run out of time, I guess there's another little like quick sub plot of this episode, which is,
oh my god, I can't believe that we didn't talk about this.
Yeah, Sam and Rebecca. Rebecca has not.
Guys, they literally bump into each other with their phones in their hands, and I thought maybe and nothing.
She has not replied since last episode. He's been checking the chat every couple, sometimes there'll be three little dots, but then they'll go away.
There's an amazing moment in the locker room where they're all gathered around watching the dots show up and excited, and
like
then
at first they're just like, oh, she's lost interest, and somebody is like, well, maybe she got hit by a bus. And as they're all being like kind of dismissive and making jokes about why she hasn't replied, the three little dots come up, and all of their bullshit joking goes out the window because these motherfuckers are all deeply invested in this
They're
shit.
invested. I love it so much.
And it was such a great moment of like pulling the curtain down because they were all being like, oh, maybe she got hit by a bus. And then they're all like, oh my God, she's texting. It was so great. And then she doesn't, and then they're all like all disappointed because the dots go away.
I think it's Jamie that says something like that gets you right in the glands or something like that. And I was like, wow. I don't know why, but saying glands instead of like balls is just worse. One of them, Jamie's making fun of like the text talking about she got bored to death, and he makes a joke about Ratatouille being Sam's favorite movie. And then it cuts to Rebecca and Keely on the sofa talking about Ratatouille also, and Rebecca just like, this has got to be a bad sign. And Keely is like, well, as a matter of fact, Ratatouille is about how snottiness is the antithesis of art, and good art can come from anywhere. So get over it. It was a brilliant movie.
It really is a good movie.
Love
too.
You, Keely. Yeah, I haven't watched it in a long time, but I remember just loving it.
It's I don't watch it. Like I tend to like not watch a lot of like air quotes kids movies. But eventually they will show up on cable and I'll just be home on a Sunday and I'm like, fuck it, I'll watch it. Yeah. So good. I've watched it like a bunch of times. It really is one that I really, really enjoy.
Have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Not yet.
All right.
It is available on Prime now. I'm trying to decide. I'm trying to wait for it to be free. But I might just...
It's worth paying for.
I might just rent it.
It's really worth paying for.
Yeah, I heard it was fantastic. So yeah, but Keely is just telling Rebecca, fucking tell him you want to meet. Higgins is just like, tell him the truth. Tell him you're afraid to meet him because the idea you built up in your head can't possibly be met in real life.
God, I'm like, oh, please, you guys, figure it out, please.
So by the end of this episode, she had not answered his text at all.
Nope.
What do you think?
Agony.
Does she answer the text? Do they meet, or does she chicken out? What do you think happens? As we're running out of time. Putting you on the spot.
I really don't know.
Oh, you don't know.
I'm gonna say she does meet him. Because if that doesn't happen, I will be just devastated.
Oh.
That's pretty much what it comes down. It's just wishful thinking. Like, if they do anything other than the thing, I will be just like, why am I here? What are you doing? Why are you here? Why is anything?
Well, clearly I have no idea what happens. So I don't know. It's
smugness. The smugness.
All a mystery.
All right. It's time for new patrons. This week, we've got Shepherd Geek. We've got Imperial Lady Rebecca. Ooh, the puppy is interested. Okay, he's up now. He does not care for this.
It's a loud ass noise. Of course he's up now.
We've got Miranda Calhoun. And Nick Hitchcock. And McCurm.
What? You just bullshitted your way to that last one.
No, listen, the last one is spelled McKmrln.
Oh, okay.
So you help me and tell me how you would say that.
No, ma'am.
And I'll say it.
I would really rather not. I'm going to mind my fucking business. Stay back in my lane. Not announcing new patrons lane. That's where I live.
But thank you guys so much for signing up. Really, really appreciate you. Don't forget to join the Discord. And Miles and I had to skip the last two recordings of Sookie because one, he was away for Thanksgiving vacation with his family. And then the second one, I was unfortunately having to say goodbye to two puppies that had to be put down, and it was horrible. So now we are going to be getting back on track. Of course, the holidays are coming, so there will be another week off. But I really hope that those of you who are looking for just some fun will join us for the Sookie podcast, because like those books are just goofy and a good time. Mm-hmm. And it's just a really nice, like, kind of palate cleanser for some of the more serious shit. There are serious themes in some of the episodes for sure. But, or some of the chapters or books or whatever you want to say. There are some things, but overall, it is just a lot of fun because of the vampire lore and the sexiness and the will they or won't they with various male suitors.
Got a whole
and
goddamn
it's a good time.
Eric Northman up in that bitch. His fine ass. Ugh.
Yeah,
That's the Alexander Skarsgård, right? Is that who
Yep.
that was? Eric Northman?
Yep. That
Ooh,
fucking
Chile.
7-foot tall
That
Viking
motherfucker
man.
is just, I could climb him.
And with that,
Ooh.
we'll see you next week. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Bye, guys.
No, my hands won't be tied down, and I will not lay them down, 'cause I can finally see the truth. So simple but so clear, accepting the notion's depths were out of reach for me and you. If you're coming up for air, breathing in, you know I'll be there when you first begin. And when everybody's telling us we have no time, we'll prove them wrong.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.